I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to warn you of what I didn't know and the problems other people are facing. This is not a motivational video. This is not, a standard. You can do this type of video. This is not it. And honestly, if you're waiting for life to get easier, this video will hurt. If you're ready to get honest, it will save you. I will confess, your expectations are fake. You've been taught to follow the crowd, to learn what everybody knows. And as I mentioned in my previous video, you should go against the tide. And why are expectations fake? Why are your expectations fake? Well, every generation has their own problems, their own issue. This generation is suffering through fake expectations. And so, when fake expectations happen, that's when you start thinking that failure is a bad thing. You start thinking about, all these things that are almost impossible nowadays. Nowadays you don't really need to go to college. Most expectations that people throw at you are go to college, get a good job, career, and whatever, right? That's not the case nowadays. And if you want to do that, you want to have an average life, go ahead. But the deep, dark reality is that if you really want to be successful in life, you have to have real expectations. You have to know what's real and what's fake. You have to know exactly when to continue and when to give up. Because sometimes you have to give up, because if you're doing something that is hurting you more and more, just stop. And most of you are taught to not give up. However, it's okay to give up sometimes when you know for sure it's just not going to work out at all. When it's really, really impossible. And it hurts to say this, because I know a lot of people will get demotivated, but if you're doing something right now that's causing you more harm than good, and everyone's just telling you, you have to do this, you just have to stop and say, you know what? Who am I doing it for? Am I doing it for me, or am I doing it for other people? Do I want to be happy, or do I want to suffer? And yes, there are things they have to do in life to suffer in order to succeed, but there's good pain and bad pain. Just like how there's good and bad for everything in life. There's good and bad pain. Expectations are fake nowadays. A lot of times it's the same thing over and over again, outdated information. You have to really go against the tide. And honestly, you do not need motivation. You need standards. Motivation is emotional. Standards are non-negotiable. Hey guys, brand new day. So as I was mentioning from the other day, look, standards are non-negotiable, because when you put yourself in a standard, that's when you start having your own ideas, your own mindsets, your own standards, right? Instead of relying on motivation, you want to rely or not rely on motivations. You want to rely on your own standards, your own beliefs, your own goals, right? And it's so imperative that you don't let anyone decide what you do, right? Because at the end of the day, it's more so and I know that's going to sound very egoistical, right? But it's really all about you. What you want to accomplish, what you really want in this life, It's up to you, right? No one else can control you. No one else can, put things in your mind. You're not supposed to let anyone do that, right? So it all comes down to one thing, and that's, having standards. And the reason why this hurts is because a lot of people just don't want to accept it. They want to rely on what other people feel. They want to have that connection, right? That what's that word? That acceptance. Have that acceptance, and being obligated to, not obligated, but you know where I'm coming from, right? It's, you want to feel what other people feel about you, and you have to really understand that. You have to really stop caring what other people think. You have to have your own standards and not rely on motivation, right? Because look, let's say you have a really good job, right? You're in a really good position, and you really are not doing so well mentally, right? That's when you say, what am I doing? I'm putting myself an example, right? To other people, I'm setting an example. So the standards I have to set is high, high standards, expectations, it's really nothing that you shouldn't be worried about, because everybody's going to expect you to do something, right? Whether it's a certain behavior, a certain, dressed in a certain way, whatever it is, people are having an expectation, especially when you do something really good, people are expecting that again. So you really have to have that mindset of, I'm gonna stop caring what other people think, and I'm just gonna do me, you know what I mean? Whether people like it or not. And that's the reason why it hurts, is because people don't want to admit that it's all about me, 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 me. Even though it's your life, you get to decide what you want to do, no one else, right? And another reason why it hurts is because, you want to feel that validation. That's the word I'm looking for, the validation from other people. You have to really understand that, if you really want to be someone in life, that's something that you really have to stop, doing, seeking validation. And which brings me to another point that I really want to discuss as well, is that in life, there's going to be a lot of disappointments. Actually, more disappointments than making, these expectations, right? There's going to be a lot of disappointment, because at the end of the day, whatever that you're doing, people are not really going to accept it. And that's something that it's hard to understand, right? It's really hard to understand. And a lot of people have to understand that, because it's not that you're ready or you have to be ready. There's no such thing as getting ready. You have to do it. You have to do whatever it takes to meet these requirements of yourself, having these standards. And, which brings to an example. I'm not going to go much into detail, but, a recent example of, having these expectations, having these, goals, mindset. It's going to disappoint a lot of people, and that's something that a lot of people are not ready for. It's something that definitely people are not ready for. If you don't meet the expectations, especially if you don't meet other people's standards, that's another thing, having other people's standards. That's why it's very important to not care what other people think. Even though it sounds very egoistical, it's something that, it's very drawn upon. So there's really no such thing as getting ready, because at the end of the day, it's all about just doing it, and it's waking up and doing it. Because, when you think you're ready, or you're trying to get ready, it's going to take a long time to realize that, all this time, there's no such thing as getting ready. And that really hurts to a lot of people. So an example that I really want to give is, sometimes things happen in life, not being quote unquote ready, even though, you did your very best. you disappoint people, and you know what? You have to face it up and say, you know what? This is my, you know, uh, standards. I'm not, even though I'm not ready, I shouldn't be ready because I know when to do it and when to not do it. The right timing. It's all about the timing, people, right? That's the thing that hurts to say is that, when you want to do something, you have to do it on your own time, right? Your own time, your own, your own way, instead of, other people's way. And that's something that really, hurts, is that you lose people. And when you lose people, sometimes it's a blessing because, you lose people that were dragging you down. And, it's, you lose people, you gain people. There's really no in between. You can't keep people, you can't satisfy people, you can't please everyone. That's another lesson that I've learned recently. You can't satisfy anyone because you have to do things your own way. You can't do other people's way. There's no such thing as, oh, I have to get ready and this and that. You just do it when you do it. There's no getting ready. There's no, expectations. There's no such thing as, listen to other people. There's no such thing as that. It's all about how you control your life and, having your own standards. That's a big, big thing. And when you're really, really doing all this and you get to a really low point in your life, guess what? And this is a big shocker. No one will be there to save you. No one will be there to save you. No one, not even your loved ones, your family, your friends, your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whoever it is. There's really no one that's going to back you up. There's really no one that's going to save you, right? And once you realize that, that's when you become better, And you would know when you're at your lowest point in your life is when nobody's willing to help you out. Even if one person is there willing to help you out, and that person did their very best, guess what? That's the best a person can do. You don't cry about it. You don't bitch about it. You don't, you don't get mad about it. He or she did his very best, and all you can do is thank the person. But and then when you do that and you thank the person, do not have expectations. Do not have expectations for that person to save you, because if you think people are going to save you, then you're pretty much going to ruin yourself. It's all about you. You have to pick yourself up. You have to have your own standards from getting that low point to the high point. And the birds are fighting. Anyways, but look, it's really a tough conversation to have when you start to realize that, no one's going to save me. No one's going to help me out at my lowest or even at my highest point. People want something from you. When you're at your highest point, people want something from you. When you're at your lowest, people want nothing from you. And that's how life is. People want something from others. And you have to have your own, establish that mindset that, yes, it's okay to have friends and lovers and everything, but, having that standard is, they're not going to save me. Having, that mindset is, they're not going to save me. They're just not going to, save me, if something really goes wrong. So I have to do everything on my own. I'm going to give you one example of this. So, well, actually, you know what? A friend's example. Something happened, right? And, next thing you know, he tried to get help. The person tried to get help. and you know the person did their very best. That's all they can do. You know, don't expect someone to save your life. You know, even if the person did their very best, to that one person, when nobody wanted to help out, that one person, you know, you don't complain, you don't get sad about it, you don't say, oh, I guess the world doesn't like me or love me or whatever it is. No, it's because nobody wants to put up with, you know, people's problems. I don't want to put up with other people's problems. I don't want to, you know, someone to put up with my problems. So it's like, you know, it's a tough lesson to learn because life is all about survival. And surviving means surviving on your own. And when you realize that, it's, you know what, it's all said and done. I'm going to go from, you know, from the low point to high points. No one's going to save you. No one. And, you know, it sucks that some people are just very, you know, they have the expectation of people to save me. They're not. You have to stop having expectations, you know, having, you know, a proper, the standards, having the standards. And, you know, it's a tough lesson. It really is. You might be watching this video and saying, you know what, it kind of doesn't hurt, you know, I learned a lot from this, but really deep down, it's whatever you're experiencing right now. Apply what you just learned today. Use it to what's happening right now, and you'll realize that, you know what, I am fucked. You know, if you're in a low point in your life right now, if you're having a lot of problems, you lost everything, you know, you might say, oh, this is really bad. But you have to have, you know, that standard of yourself. Like, you know what? If this is how people see me, if this is how I see myself, and this is how other people are see me, so why am I like this? You know, I have to get better. You know, especially because, you know, when people are in the low point in their lives, it's like, look, I can help people out, but I'm not going to save them. You know, because if they don't know what to do in their problem, you know, how am I supposed to help out? If you don't even know what to do in your own problem, what makes you think that I can fix it for you? You know, and it's a tough thing. Hey guys, brand new day. So, you know, I was thinking about like what's the next topic to talk about. That's, you know, a huge life lesson that, you know, it's painful to hear, but, you know, it's very important, right? And this video has been nothing but a warning that you have to know this, because, you know, in life you're gonna come across something so devastating to a certain extent. You know, everybody has their own devastating events, but, you know, it's all in a matter of how you handle it and how do you go by it, right? The final thing I want to talk about that a lot of people lack nowadays is discipline. Discipline is a huge thing, and ties everything together. You know, discipline is all about, you know, how can you control yourself? How can you control everything and yourself, which is the most important thing, and the situation that you're in. You know, discipline is all about that. You know, and with discipline, you can really not do everything, but you can do it better than most people are doing. And if someone has to be in a similar situation that you're in, you know, and you have a better discipline, you'll know if you have a better discipline, it's because you handled it well. You know, it's all about emotional control as well. That's a big thing as well. Emotional control, because if you're in a really bad situation, it's all a matter of how you handle it. If you can't handle it, then it means you're not disciplined enough, which may seem like it's a bad thing, which it is, but, you know, everything takes time in life. And how can you be disciplined enough to realize that, you know, it's okay to fail? That's a big thing. Once they realize that it's okay to fail, that's when you're disciplined. time is a major commodity, and it takes discipline, and unfortunately some people don't have that in themselves, which in turn causes their life to be harder than it is now. They do things where it collapses relationships, it collapses relationships in terms of lovers or friends or whatever, or work even. It collapses so many things if a person is not in a right mindset, right? And unfortunately there's a lot of people out there who lack discipline, and it's a terrible thing, which I'm really, really stressing so hard on this, is that there's gonna be a point in your life when something really catastrophic happens and no one's gonna be there to save you. No one. It's a little bit bittersweet because when you're just alone surviving, nothing else really matters, right? You lose someone, it's okay at the end of the day, because you might have done the right thing by staying disciplined and removing those people that are causing you a bad life. And it's a tough thing to mention, but sometimes there are people out there who you have to remove in your life because they're just like keeping you down or keeping you on the same level. You can't grow because you're surrounded with people who just like discipline, and that really affects you in a certain way. So I'm gonna stop right here and tell me what you think about this, these topics that I mentioned. And I also want to hear what your big life lesson is. I want to hear from you as well. So next video, I'm not really sure, but next video I'm thinking of making a video of something that I really wanted to talk about, so be on the lookout for that as well. Bye guys.